Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to do some prep work for Secret Invasion by trying to figure out when did Nick Fury and Talos switch places. Now, there's been a lot of theories about this out there, but I think the easiest way to break down this issue is to lay out a chronological listing of every appearance of Nick Fury in the MCU. So let's dive right in and see what we can find out. So his first appearance is in Captain Marvel, which is in June of 1995. And one of the important things we learned during a conversation with Carol is that he can't eat toast that's been cut diagonally. Now, not surprisingly, this is an important fact that will come up later, so keep it in mind. We also meet Talos and his wife Soren, so that means really any appearance after Captain Marvel by Nick Fury or Maria Hill could be Talos and Soren impersonating them. In fact, every appearance technically could be. That's kind of wild to consider. All right, we also learn that if a Skrull is impersonating somebody else and then they are either grievously injured or killed, they will revert back to their Skrull natural form. That's also important to keep in mind because that will come up later as well. Okay, Nick Fury's next appearance is in Iron Man in the end credit scene, which occurs in November 2010, and he shows up to tell Tony Stark the good news that he's going to be part of the Avengers initiative. Then Nick Fury's next appearance is in Iron Man 2. Now this is during Fury's big week in June of 2011, and unfortunately he shows up to tell Tony Stark, well, might have spoken too soon, we just need you as a consultant. Sorry, bud. All right, then Nick Fury's next appearance is in Thor in the end credit scene, which is also during Fury's big week in June of 2011. And in this case, he's asking Eric Selvig to help him understand what on earth is going on with the Tesseract. Nick Fury's next appearance is in Captain America the First Avengers end credit scene, which is in October of 2011. In this case, Cap has been unfrozen from the ice and thrust into the modern era, and there, standing before him, is Nick Fury himself. Then his next appearance is in the OG movie Avengers, which is in May of 2012. It's also the first appearance of Maria Hill, and both of them have a huge role throughout the movie, and in fact, the Avengers wouldn't have been successful if not for both of their help. Then Nick Fury appears in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 1, Episode 2, entitled 084. Now, honestly, I don't know if Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is still considered canon or not. I know it used to be, and Kevin Feige said so himself, but is it still canon? I don't know. I'm including it for completeness, though, because he does appear in 2 episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. This one is in October of 2013, at least that's when it came out, so I'm going to go with that date, and he shows up to basically scold Agent Coulson for causing so much damage to the bus, which is their floating headquarters. All right, then Nick Fury next appears in Captain America the Winter Soldier in a really big role, and it's very important to note that in the movie he is grievously injured, basically almost killed. He fakes his own death. And since I suspect he wasn't planning on getting really badly injured, then he probably wasn't ready for this. And that would mean that if this had been Talos impersonating him, he would have turned back to Talos while he was, on the operating table, basically out cold. So I think this is pretty much evidence that at least in this appearance, it is absolutely Nick Fury and not Talos impersonating him. Now, by the end of the movie, of course, S.H.I.E.L.D. has fallen, and he's basically the director of nothing. So Nick Fury heads off into the wilderness to places unknown. Well, maybe not unknown because he shows up a month later in May of 2014 in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 1, Episode 22, the final episode of that season called Beginning of the End. And in this case, he hands over the black box to Agent Coulson, who is now dubbed Director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Well, or whatever is left of S.H.I.E.L.D., right? So the next reference then to Nick Fury is in Thor Love and Thunder during a flashback scene going through the many times that Jane and Thor dated. Now, it's not real clear when these scenes took place, in particular this scene, but I'd like to think it was probably around the time of Age of Ultron when Thor was on Earth and was helping the Avengers track down all the Hydra agents that scattered after the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. So in this case, Nick Fury is calling Thor to ask him for help, probably again to go after those Hydra agents. Then Nick Fury, maybe, appears in Avengers Age of Ultron, which occurs from April to May of 2015. I say maybe because, yeah, you guessed it, he cuts his toast diagonally. It's very unlikely he would cut toast diagonally, considering he said that he can't eat it that way in Captain Marvel. So my guess is this was Marvel saying, hey, this is not Nick Fury in this case, and this is Talos impersonating him. All right. His next appearance is in Avengers Infinity War, which is May of 2018. He shows up in the end credit scene just in time to get blipped. And so some people have thought, oh, well, this has to be the real Nick Fury, because if it was Talos, he would have turned back to Talos while he was being blipped. Maybe. I mean, maybe not. It's not like he was injured or even killed. He just ceased to be. The snap just made everybody disintegrate. So this could be Nick Fury, but it could be Talos as well. We really don't know, because I just don't think he would have turned back to Talos while he was being blipped. All right, so his next appearance after coming back from the blip, if that was even him that was blipped, right? But his next appearance after everyone came back, at least, is in Avengers Endgame, which is October 2023, and he shows up at Tony Stark's funeral to pay his respects. Then he is referenced in WandaVision, which occurs in November of 2023, when one of the Skrulls, who presumably works with Fury, tells Monica Rambeau that Fury wants to meet her up there, referring to somewhere in space, presumably the Sword headquarters spaceship in space. Then both Nick Fury and Maria Hill, maybe, appear in Spider-Man Far From Home, which is from June to July of 2024. I say maybe because it doesn't take too long before we realize, okay, it is not Fury and Hill, it is Talos and Soren. So this is when we finally learn that they have been impersonating Fury and Hill, and maybe have been doing it for a long time. And we learn that Fury is, well, up there, right, where he asked Monica Rambeau, presumably, to meet him, which is Sword headquarters in space. Then in Spider-Man No Way Home, which picks up right after Far From Home and is in July of 2024, Fury is referenced again, this time by Peter Parker, who says, hey, I know I'm in trouble, but Fury can vouch for me. And Agent Cleary says, no, he's been off-world for a year. Now, it's worth noting, a year would be July of 2023. And I don't know, I would just like to kind of think that it was Fury that showed up at Tony Stark's funeral, not that he sent Talos to go pretend to be Fury. So maybe Cleary isn't saying a full year. 9 months is enough to round up to a year. Plus, consider it is Sony, and Sony gets the years wrong all the time. They had the 8 years earlier thing in Homecoming. Yikes. So either way, I don't know that this definitively means that Fury couldn't have been at the funeral. But if it was a full year, 12 months, then yeah, he couldn't have been. So anyway, then we're finally going to see Nick Fury himself, for sure, in Secret Invasion. And we know that part of Secret Invasion occurs during the blip, because Feige said part of it will occur then. We know that part of it is probably also going to be in present day as well, which is likely spring of 2026, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, what's interesting is, if Fury is going to appear during the blip, then obviously he wasn't blipped on May of 2018 by Thanos. And in fact, if Talos appears during that period, Talos wasn't blipped either. So who the heck was blipped? I mean, maybe Fury had multiple body doubles, multiple Skrulls, who were impersonating him. And it was just some poor schmuck that was unlucky enough to be Fury that day. So anyway, that is certainly interesting to consider. And in fact, well, let's get to the question at hand, right? When did Fury and Talos switch places? Well, we know that it had to be Fury and Captain Marvel because he hadn't even met Talos yet. And I'm pretty sure, like 99% sure, it was him in Winter Soldier because of the serious injury he had. So in my opinion, Fury has been Fury in every at least major appearance from 95 to 2014. Now, it doesn't mean Talos couldn't have been impersonating him, at different points in time. But if you think about it, surely that was the real Nick Fury that showed up in Iron Man in the end credit scene. And surely that was Nick Fury in Avengers. I mean, I don't think Talos could have performed as well. No offense to Talos, but he's kind of flying by the seat of his pants at times. So I would like to think that Fury was Fury until the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. I do believe, though, since we know he wasn't Fury in Age of Ultron there in April to May of 2015, I'm betting he just left Earth after S.H.I.E.L.D. fell. And maybe after he handed over the reins to Agent Coulson, assuming, those episodes are still canon. then basically he went off to go form Sword in space at that point. And then I don't think we saw him again in person until until Tony Stark's funeral. So, because I really like to think that was actually him. So obviously that means he wasn't blipped, because I think he's going to show up during the 5-year period. So that's when Fury and Talos, I believe, switched places. But I have another question. Was there ever a Maria Hill? I mean, this is kind of a crazy theory, but I've heard a couple of people float this. We don't meet Maria Hill until well after Captain Marvel. We first meet her in Avengers with no backstory, or at least not much. So is it possible it's always been Soren, Talos' wife? Wouldn't that be wild if there really was no Maria Hill? Now, I would like to think there was, because she's a great character. But it's still an interesting question. Was there ever a Maria Hill? Wow. Something to consider. So, it's time to tell me what you think, right? Let me know what you think. When did Talos and Nick Fury switch places? Was there ever a Maria Hill? Let me know in the comments. I love reading them. I love to respond to all of them. If you don't mind, also like this video. You can subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content. And in the meantime, we can all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, ever-changing, ever-scroll impersonating Marvel Cinematic Universe.